Radical.
All right, so I had a commute from going to get something to eat tonight, and I thought to myself, let me, click on YouTube, and I will do that thing where I just choose something from my sidebar that was recommended to me, and I'll talk about it. And it happened to be something called I'm Done with Retro Game Collecting from RGT85. Now, I can't recall if the thumbnail actually just said I'm done, which would classify as possible clickbait, which is, what Scotty Kilmer, that mechanic, often does, says, bye, I'm done, or whatever. But at the moment, I can't really verify if, he's done clickbait before. But he talks about, in the first 5 minutes that I checked out or listened to, he talked about how he's pretty much done with retro game collecting. He goes into this story about like his mom possibly being picked up by somebody flexing that he had a Sega Saturn, which I don't believe that story because it just seems so far-fetched. It might be one of those like, Dreamcast guy stories like, and then she smelled like cheese, so it might be one of those fake stories, but I don't know. Maybe it legitimately happened. Kind of weird though. He talked about the Sega Saturn in specifically, and how the average game for the Sega Saturn was $36. That's nuts. He talked about Resident Evil being loose $140. That is just crazy. It's stupid. I agree with RGT85. It's stupid. He talks about how he's done retro game collecting. Well, obviously, I don't blame him for being done retro game collecting. With games being that expensive. Now, I will say that I question his distinction between saying he's done collecting, yet he got some Game Gear games for that analog. He got some Game Gear games that he wanted to play, but that's not collecting. Okay, well, wait a second. If you have games, then by definition, if you have more than one game, then that classifies as a collection. If you have 50 games for Xbox, but you say, well, I just want to get what I want to play, but I'm not collecting anything. No, you have a collection. Collecting, Sean. Is that your name, Sean? If you're done collecting, then that means you're no longer going to buy any retro games. So essentially, the whole premise of this doesn't make any sense. Unless you just are actually saying, I'm done buying retro games. I think this would classify as clickbait. But yeah, I do agree with him on some things. The prices, like I said, are just nuts. I do disagree with him wholeheartedly. I do disagree on one thing. He says that the retro gaming bubble, the price bubble, will not... He says that the bubble will not burst. The bubble will not burst. I think it will. I think the bubble will burst, and I'll tell you why. Maybe not anytime soon, but you think about retro games, right? What is held in high regard? The NES, the Super NES, the Saturn, the PlayStation. See, there was limited game copies back in the 90s and 80s. Maybe the early thousands and whatnot. But when you get to the 360, PlayStation 3 era, those games, they're not in short supply. How many copies of Gears of War are there out there? How many people are going to be passionate in the years ahead for collecting for those titles? And let's say, when we get ahead, maybe years down the road, and people are collecting for the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Hello? You need updates to play those games. At some point, retro gaming will dissipate. The bubble will burst. It's just a question of when. It's just a question of when. And I'm not talking about the titles like, the graded titles like Super Mario 64 or whatever. Maybe people will still go gaga over the graded titles or whatever. And stadium events and, the NASCAR or whatever, The rare titles, they'll still get some money. But like the Resident Evils for Saturn going for $140
$200. You know, the Earthbound's going for like, I mean, what, like $600-700? I don't know. The Flintstones, the Dinosaur Peak. Those games that really don't have a lot of significant nostalgia. It's connected to nostalgia for a lot of those titles. That is when the bubble will pop. It's just a question of when. Okay? It doesn't matter how many of these retro gaming YouTubers we got, hyping up the prices of video games, these retro games like, oh, I don't know, Metal Jesus. It doesn't matter. Okay? They will not stop the bubble from popping. It's just a question of when, what decade, when it does. Might take a while, but the bubble will pop. I guarantee you. So I do disagree with him. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. So, yeah, some thoughts on the first 5 minutes or so of this. If you made it through the end of that upload, I don't know, enlighten me on what he talks about later. Chances are, though, I probably won't care, and I'm going to be watching some highlights from some basketball games.